Okay, let me just give you a quick summary of where we are. What we've done in these first sections is to have a very simple framework. So although we talked about risk on occasion, essentially we've been assuming there's certainty. And although we've talked a little bit about debt, essentially what we've been assuming is that the firm is all equity financed. We've developed some concepts, time value of money, and NPV as a measure of wealth creation. And hopefully you're beginning to start developing the skills of calculating present values and net present value and finding cash flows from accounting data. Now what we're going to do now is extend that basic framework. So what we're going to do for the next few lectures is look at what happens if we relax the assumption of certainty. How should we think about risk and so forth. And then in the second part of the course, we're going to talk a lot about what happens with debt versus equity finance. The important point at the moment is that this is the framework we're going to keep throughout the course. In the sense we're going to have the same kinds of concepts, the same kinds of skills. Now's the time to make sure that you've got those down. Because what we're going to be doing is deepening our understanding of various parts, but try and get this simple framework down now. Any questions on that? So let's start with our discussion of risk. Section 7 is on measuring risk. Think about it. How do we measure it? How do we include it in our analysis? And we're going to start with 2 motivation examples because we've got a long way to go before we get results. I'm going to start with a situation where you've got 2 investments. The first is shares in a company that has a gold prospector as its employee. And what they do is they go out and search for gold in the Rockies. Got one guy, old guy, goes out and looks for gold. Now there's a 10% probability that he strikes gold. And if he does that, the payoff on your stock is 100. But 90% of the time, he strikes nothing. And in that case, the payoff is 0. So on average, you get 0.1 times 100, which is 10, plus 0.9 times 0, which is 10. So the average is 10. Now your second investment opportunity is shares in a company that's an electric utility. We're going to have 2 states again to keep things simple. And there's a 0.5 probability that the economy does well. And if the economy does well, people use a lot of electricity and the utility makes a lot of money. So the payoff is, in that case, 15. The remaining state, there's a 0.5 probability the economy does badly. And in that case, the payoff is 5. People don't use as much electricity, but they're still using it, and that's what we get. And the average is, again, 10. That's 0.5 times 15 plus 0.5 times 5 to give us 10. Now the question we're interested in is which is more risky in a financial sense. The gold prospector, 10% probability of 100, 90% probability of 0. Or is it the electric utility with a 50% chance of 15 and 50% chance of 5? So raise your hand if you think that the gold prospector is more risky. Okay, raise your hand if you think the electric utility is more risky. Okay, well, the correct answer is the electric utility. Yes. So how could that possibly be? How could it be such an obvious answer which is wrong? Well, the gold prospector is the answer that would be correct if you put all your money in one stock. So if we put all your money in one stock, then 90% of the time you starve, 10% of the time you do really well and be rich. That's pretty risky. The electric utility, if you put all your money in that, the worst you're going to do is get 5, so you're going to make it through. You're not going to starve. You're not going to do well, but you're not going to starve. And at 15, you're going to do fine. You're going to do well. Now, the key point, though, is that what we're going to argue is that one of the most basic ideas in finance is that you shouldn't put all your money in one stock. What should you do? You should diversify. You should hold a portfolio of stocks. Now, if you hold a portfolio of stocks, it changes the notion of risk dramatically. Because if you hold a whole set of stocks like this one, so for example, suppose you have 100 prospectors going out into the Rockies looking for gold, how many are going to strike gold? 10. Might be 9, might be 11, but it's going to be somewhere around 10. So what's happened to the risk? Gone down, because now you're near the mean. If you have 1,000 that go out into the Rockies, where are you going to be at? You're going to be very near 100. Yeah, so this is a kind of risk which you can diversify away by holding a large portfolio of stocks which have got independent risks. What about the electric utility? Suppose you hold 100 stocks just like the electric utility. What happens to the risk? It's just the same, because what does the risk depend on? It depends on the economy. So in that case, you can't diversify away the risk. It just depends on the economy. And so it turns out the electric utility is actually much more risky in a portfolio sense. And that's how we're going to start thinking about risk. It's a very different way than the standard way, which is you just look what's the risk on an individual stock. That's not the way to think about it anymore. Think about it as part of a portfolio, and what does the stock contribute to the risk of the portfolio? Any questions on that example and how it's working?